So today's session is going to, I hope you brought a pen and a piece of paper with you. I hope you've got a cuppa to keep you company, because I want your brain to be in a really good place. And on this call today, we're going to have people who know me very well, like Beryl. I've got Jacob, Kirsty, and Melissa saying Happy New Year as well. But we're going to have people who've worked with me for the whole time that EYMaths has existed, which is almost 3 years now. Well, 3 years in April next year. Then we'll have some of you who've literally never met me until today. So you're going to be at all different stages of your journey. And the most important thing is I want you to really listen to the messages that I give you today about the bigger picture, because the people who have chosen to come on this call today, who've already done lots of work with me, or perhaps done 1 or 2 sessions and had their mind blown by the fact that what I'm going to share with you is so easy and so simple. And instead of you going down this road, which you've always been down, you are going to go down a completely new road, and you're going to think, why did no one tell me this? Why have I been teaching this many years and no one has helped me see that if I do it this way, it can make so much of a difference? So stay really open-minded, thoroughly enjoy this session with me. And I'm going to, say right from the start, the reason I am running this free training today is to show you what I can do to help you from this point. There are lots of ways you can work with me for free. You can use this YouTube channel, but what I'm really interested in is those of you who want to take a step forward from what you see today and say, yep, I really want to learn with you. I want the experiences that so many members that are joining us today have had and the impact they're seeing on their children. So if you like what you hear, if it makes sense to you, if you see the enthusiasm in the comments, I can see I've got Caroline and Susanna and Kate. They are all either what we call impact or greater impact members with me already. There's 2 different levels. And the reason they've come along today, they know this stuff, but they'll be here because 1, they're so excited to continue the journey. And 2, they can tell me in the chat box, they're thinking, I know this stuff, but when I hear it again, it's going to really, really crystallize in my mind that this is what I need to do for my children. Because so easily we default to old habits. We default to what we've known before. And particularly when we're feeling a bit scared at the beginning of term, that is very, very normal. All right, so Happy New Year, everyone. Happy New Year from Switzerland as well. So keep saying hi. I don't think the comments are kept on YouTube afterwards. I'm not as familiar with how it works on a live, so keep talking. Question-wise, if you have a question, I'm going to say let's not have too many questions in this type of session, but you can put a capital Q at the start. The best place to ask questions is to come over to my Facebook group, which is simply EYMaths 3 to 5 with Karen Wilding. Come on there and you can ask questions anytime you like, and then we can spend time answering them. Okay, so Susanna says so true about the clarification, because Susanna's one of my impact members. Okay, so I'm going to get started straight away. And hopefully all the technology will work really, really well. So here we go. Let's have a look. So I'm going to set things up for you, but so many of you, I asked this on my Facebook group and said, what are you going to be teaching in the next 2 to 3 weeks with your children? I specialize in helping those of you who work with 3 to 5-year-olds. And the big message that came back was numbers 1 to 5, moving on to 6. And I've included 0 to 5 here. And what I want to do today is look at the biggest possible picture to get you to be able to do this brilliantly, and then show you where you can find the tools to do this. So I hope all this makes sense. Those of you who know me well are not going to be surprised by the way I share things today. If you're new to me, you may not get exactly what you expected, but believe me, what you're going to get is much better than what you expected. So trust me on that. Okay, so our aims today are around the fact that not all of you, but many of you will be using some sort of scheme. I get a lot of questions about either things like White Rose or Maths No Problem or Power Maths, if you're familiar with any of those. We've got approaches such as the NCETM in the UK, which isn't a scheme, but is a supportive program. We've got those of you in other parts of the world and even other parts of the UK, like Scotland and Ireland and Wales, where sort of Northern Ireland as well as Ireland, but where you're using a different approach. And I get messages saying, will it suit me? I'm in, primary one. Everything that I show you today, I want you to think about it as you need this in order to use any scheme. You cannot use a scheme on its own. Nobody can at any year group, whether we're talking about early years, primary or secondary, because it's a bit like trying to use a medical manual. Can you imagine if we picked up a manual that was aimed at a doctor and tried to use it? We might do that in an emergency, but hopefully none of us would feel confident to try and do an operation out of a book, because what it says in the book isn't what you need. You need the knowledge of the human body. You need the knowledge of the condition, and then the stuff in the book will make sense. So let me know in the chat box. I can't see that at the moment, but I'll look back later. But let me know if that makes sense to you, and have a look at what other people are saying. So I'm going to give you 3 ingredients today that will enable you to use a scheme. And if you don't use a scheme, or if you're in nursery, so in the UK, that's 3 to 4 years old, many of you are saying, I want a scheme for my nursery children. You don't need a scheme. But what you're actually saying is, I don't know enough about what I'm supposed to do yet. I don't feel confident enough yet. I don't have enough tools in my toolbox to feel reassured that the provision that I'm giving my children is the right provision. And you also want to dovetail in with what's happening if you're in a school nursery. You want to dovetail into what's happening there. And I totally understand that. But I want you to realize that it's a bit like a tree. And there's an image of this on my website. We need to invest in you. And I see that as the roots of the tree, the nutrition around the tree. And then those branches could be a scheme that you choose to use, or your school has told you you have to use. You will then use that scheme or that approach or that resource you found online really well. And that is what I call being a user and not a follower. When I see comments on social media or questions to me and they say, we follow this scheme, and it tells me everything. You don't want to follow anything. You want to use it, and you can only use it when you understand it. So that's a massive message. And then our ultimate aim, the bottom aim there, is we want to give children what we could call number sense mastery. And number sense is so much more than understanding numbers. So it's not just being able to say number names and write digits and count, which is certainly where I've come from. So I want you to think now, where are you on your journey? Are you at the beginning, where you're going to be where I was and where many of my members were, where you've got a certain understanding based on life so far? And of course, you only know what you know. You don't know what you don't know. And the only way to find out what you don't know is to have a really open mind. For many of you, you will have started on this journey, you've begun to think differently, but you're feeling a little bit insecure and you want a lot more input. And for many of you, my impact members and my greater impact members, you know this stuff, but you just want these as reminders so that you refocus. Okay, so what I'm not going to give you today, and I genuinely want you to switch off and go and do something else if this is what you want. I am not going to give you in this webinar a series of activities to teach numbers 0 to 5. And I wouldn't blame you for expecting that's what you thought you were going to get if you've never worked with me before. The internet is full of activities that are tasks for teaching numbers 0 to 5. And if that's what you want, and you want to go straight to the provision of an activity, you would be much better off just going straight to the scheme or going straight to a video online, because that's not what I'm going to give you. And the reason it is that I'm not going to give you it is because it doesn't work. And it's what everybody's been doing for decades and tying themselves in knots because it doesn't work. And I've put the example here. Can you imagine being given the keys to the pharmacy as a doctor when you're first starting out training, but you haven't been taught about the human body and how the human body goes wrong and what causes that and how to treat that? There is no point in you having the keys to a pharmacy and to the drugs that will treat the condition if you don't understand the condition. And the problem with a scheme or an activity, whether it be online or in a textbook, is that is the treatment. But if you don't understand the condition, then it's not going to work. And the other way I want you to think about this is I'm currently suffering, for example, with a bad back. Can you imagine if you were sitting in a lecture now, again as a medic, because I use medical examples because I think we all know how important this is and we can take it seriously and be horrified by some of the examples I'm giving, and it makes us think about it. But if you were going to learn about what causes back pain and how to treat back pain as a professional, I don't think you'd expect the very first lecture you had to be all about, well, we do this to the back and we do that to the back. I hope you wouldn't anyway. I hope you would expect the first lecture to be, let's understand the spine. Let's understand the big picture of what this is first. We can't possibly understand what goes wrong and how to treat it if we don't understand what it is. So this is, to me, absolute common sense now, but certainly in the past, this was not the way I was taught to think. So I hope all that makes sense to you. So what you're going to get today, I'm going to contextualize this. This is Emma speaking, who is one of my Impact members. And I want you to hear what she says about the transformation that the work I do with practitioners brings, and see if it's something that you think, I want that to be me. And she shares a very important message as well towards the end. She said this very, very recently in the last couple of weeks. I've gone from feeling like I never understood maths, feeling like I've never had a mathematical brain and having low confidence and self-esteem within the subject, to feeling empowered, motivated, and thinking about how to ensure maths is all around within my environment. And because of this, my children and staff team are now exploring mathematical opportunities right throughout their nursery day. From self-registration to discussing where they live on our birthday board, the language is coming and their confidence is building. So we're talking about 3 to 5 year olds here, everyone. They surprise me every day with their comments, opinions, and views. And then she's put wow bombs. That's something I talk about in EYMaths all the time. Hashtag wow bombs when you go, why didn't I know this before? This is amazing. So wow bombs all over the place. Listen to what she says here. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And that is so important with today's training and all the training that I do. And the time and things we are giving to the children to underpin their mathematical concepts really is making such a difference. So I'm going to come back on screen and just see if I can see the comments. Because at this point in this training, you have to think, is this what I want? Do I want to understand the maths? Do I want to be a really deeply invested practitioner? If you can't get past the fear that you will genuinely have of like, I'd like to do that, but I don't know how to do that yet. If you can't get past that, this is not the right place for you. However, if you're sitting there thinking, that excites me, or that scares me, but I know this person can help me with all of the people that surround me that are on the same journey as you, then you are in an amazing place. So make that decision now, because it has to be right for you. So I'm going to have a little look in the chat box. Some people masquerading as their husband. Great. Jacob saying, every time I listen, I learn something new. Wonderful. This is brain space today, isn't it? If you've put that hour in your diary and you've made a cuppa and you've done whatever you need to do with your family, this is genuinely enjoyable stuff. So let's carry on. Okay, so I promised you, and I want you to get so excited about this. I promised you that if you do what I'm going to advise today, your children will learn all of these things. Now, you don't need to read through all of these, because basically this is the curriculum for early years everywhere in the world to do with teaching number. And of course, it goes beyond numbers 0 to 5, because the range is not important. If you work with me for longer, we'll look at why you never need to understand numbers beyond 10 because of the base 10 system. But I'm not going to get into detail like that today, but just scan through this. These are the things that in June or July, suddenly Facebook groups are full of, how do I teach my children number bonds? My children don't understand how to recall things instantly. And you think that's too late. Worrying about that and assessing that in June is far too late. You need to be building this in right from the start, and you need to understand why and how. So I want you to feel like this. Okay, you may not look like this, but I want you to feel like this, because when you get your children secure in these things in the right way, using the right approaches, you are going to feel amazing. And every single person, I can guarantee, that is on their journey with me, with EYMaths, and surrounded by their fellow EYMaths members, feels like this. They occasionally fall flat on their faces. They occasionally hide with a blanket over their heads because they're normal human beings. But overall, this is how they feel. And when they don't feel like this, we're there for them. So I'm going to share with you now, this is where you need to get your pen and paper out. I want you to think about everything, and my impact members are going to be saying, literally, Karen says this all the time. You must start with why, you then must move to how, and you then move to what. And when I do planning with the people who work with me, we do our planning in terms of long-term, medium-term, and short-term based on these words. If you are new to changing your maths teaching, if you're like I used to be and you don't know what you don't know, you are likely to be just doing what? You are likely to be thinking about, here's an objective, what activity can I do to meet that objective? And every single person that is on this call today will have been like that at some point. And I want you to know that if you're there, it's because you're at the beginning of your journey. If you're further along your journey and you have a wobble, or you have something horrible happen in your personal life, you are likely to revert to that. And I can literally think of the names of members of my group in Impact, which is to say my higher level membership at the moment, that will say that they know how that feels. It's really normal, but you must start with the why. So that's what we're going to have a look at first. So number one, why do your children need to understand, in this case, numbers 0 to 5? What is the point? What is it you are going to help them achieve as a 3 to 5 year old, and then a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old, right up to a 97-year-old? If you don't start with the why, you won't ask the right questions about what you need to know. You won't ask the right questions about what it is they need to display that they can do. You won't ask questions about how can I make sure that they genuinely understand this, not just can perform certain things. Particularly, we see this on videos all the time of supposedly good practice with an adult and 2 children, and the adult's overly leading the learning and the children are performing. That isn't evidence of learning. Those children might be able to do what it is we're giving, the skill we're focusing on, but that example is not evidence of learning. That is a performance. So the why is huge, and the why needs a lot of thinking and a lot of support, which of course I'm here to give you. When we don't secure the why first, and again, the people who work with me through Impact or studying things like the Teaching Essential Number Sense course, all of this is on my website. So if you're new to me, you can go and have a look. But this will really ring true for those people. They know that not only did they do this, but they are likely to do it again if they don't stop and think first. So typical teaching issues when you don't start with the why is you will think that your job planning maths is to provide activities. Go on Instagram, go on Facebook. They are full of, here's an activity to do in the tough tray. Here's an activity to do outside. Here's an activity to teach this. And you might be listening to me thinking, well, what's wrong with that? Well, there's nothing wrong with that as long as you've gone through the why and the how first. The activity is the what. And we're going to get to that, and you'll see how this builds up. That's why I want you to make some notes while you're listening here and be really willing to not know what you don't know and discover it with me. You will unintentionally teach them stuff that's wrong. We have had so many discussions on my groups recently about circles. How many sides does a circle have? Well, either none or infinite, because you have to know what a side is, and a side has to be straight. So then suddenly people are saying, well, so if it's not called a side, what is it called? That's not something I'm going to go into in this session, but it is something I've just put into my Pathway membership as a resource to teach you the knowledge you need. And you need to know what makes a circle before you're going to teach it. You need to then think, of course, about what is appropriate to share with my children, what can they cope with, and not dumb that down at all, which I'm going to come to in a moment. But starting teaching circles with inaccurate subject knowledge is, of course, a complete recipe for disaster. It will have a huge impact on your self-confidence as well. Because when you go online and you see all different information and you see lots of different advice, you won't know who to believe. And you will convince yourself that it's because you're rubbish at maths. And you will get frustrated about the lack of support. So there's so many issues here. This is easily the most important thing we need to get right. And I'm going to come back to this in this session. A big problem we see all the time is the dumbing down. My children won't be able to understand this word. My children won't be able to cope with this concept. That usually actually isn't about the children. It's because our subject knowledge is not strong enough. Our why do they need to know this is not strong enough yet. So we ourselves don't have that security. So we think, well, how on earth could a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old have that security when I don't understand it properly? And we need to think about the why that came about, because we weren't given the right information in the first place. If we're not given the right information and we're not taught maths in an effective way, we are going to end up as adults who think like this. Sorry to spot it. There's a little typo there. You can play spot the typos and I'll correct them later. So the last one really sums up all of this. It's a genuine fear of maths and learning maths. And the reason, if you have a fear of learning maths and of maths itself, that's where I came from. And it's simply that it's not maths. It's not you. It's the way you were taught. So we need to change that. The second one is the how. So the first one was, why did they need to learn this? Okay, in the bigger picture, and we'll come back to that. It's all linked to subject knowledge, as you heard me say there. The second one is, well, how do young children learn mathematics effectively? What will enable them to make the connections in their brain? You learn something when your brain fires off connections, electrical connections. So you have neurons that fire off electricity and create a pathway between them. And the more you travel those pathways, the stronger that connection becomes. So learning is about building connections in your brain. It is as simple as that. So when we don't build those connections, when we either create something that stands alone or we don't engage the learner in the first place, they don't learn, be they children or adults. And the issues with this are, we often teach maths in isolation. So because of our fear of maths and because of our lack of understanding of maths, which is the why part of what I talked about in part 1, we see maths as happening in a slot. We have a maths time. I know all of you will appreciate that maths happens in your continuous provision, but you may not be secure in how to provide that and what it looks like. And that, again, is a massive movement in the way that I work with practitioners in how they start to see that and what we can do. So we think about maths happening in a maths area or in a slot or on a PowerPoint or at a certain time of the day. That is a dangerous way to go about teaching, because it's not the way that children learn. Is there a time to teach maths in a slot? Absolutely. But is that it? No. Does maths happen in an area? Never. So there's some really big things for us to get over here, but it all stems back to our confidence and our knowledge. And when we change that, this bit changes easily. Maths is about embedding fluency. This is a real biggie. It is not about teaching them to use a tool and finish there. It's about teaching them to use the tool to solve a problem. So if you teach them to compare amounts and compare numbers, there's no point in that unless they have problems that need them to compare amounts and compare numbers. And everyday life is full of these problems. So we start with the problem, we recognize the need for the tool, we learn the tool and apply it in the problem. That again is going to leave many of you feeling unsettled because you think that makes sense, but I don't know how to do that yet. That's why I'm here to help you to do that. We have a dominance. If you look at many schemes and things that people flag up as a positive in a scheme, oh, there's loads of PowerPoints and worksheets. That's not how children learn effectively. Can we use PowerPoints and perhaps worksheets in a small way as part of our provision? I'm not sure I'd say that worksheets have much of a place. You could show me one and prove me wrong on that. I'm very open-minded to this. Definitely some things on the screen on a PowerPoint would be helpful, but the idea of teaching your main math through a PowerPoint, you know what that's like. You're on one now. There's so much more to learning than just looking at things on a screen. It has to be meaningful. It has to be relevant to you. So be really careful. And of course, we're adults and we can cope with this a lot better. Our children are 3 to 5. So we've done why, we've done how, and now here's the familiar territory of what. So what is it you've actually got to teach them? What should the activities look like that will allow them to solve meaningful problems in everyday provision at home and with you in your setting, whatever your setting is like? And the issues that if we don't get this right, what happens is we have things like 5 and 10 frames. If you don't know what those are yet, I'm going to show you a little bit later, but we have children being taught to use 5 and 10 frames, either in the worst case scenario, incorrectly. Lots and lots of schemes use 5 and 10 frames, but they don't teach practitioners why they're important, how they fit into the bigger picture of maths, and that you shouldn't be counting on a 5 or 10 frame. That's one of the biggest issues I see. Also, there are certain patterns we use, and of course you've got to understand why. Otherwise, you think it's just a rule someone created. Oh, we have to use 5 and 10 frames in this way. Well, there's a reason why. And if we don't understand the reason, we're going to think someone's just being a bit petty, or we say this scheme uses them like this, and this scheme uses them like this, and this guy online uses them like this, and this activity uses them like this. And you will, again, tie yourself in knots. When you understand why, you will do it because it makes sense. The second one here is if we're not careful, we plan activities just based on what we understand, what's familiar to us by what other practitioners have done around us, what we've seen online, what was done to us when we were at school. And we do things because we think this is how we should teach maths. This is what the whole world's showing me, so this is what I should do. And actually, we should do what makes sense to the children, what's having an impact on the children, and what makes mathematical sense to us. So again, it goes back to that why, that number one that I mentioned. Teaching things in isolation, for example, subitizing and 5 and 10 frames, which are all connected, they are going to be the basis of comparison of numbers, how to decompose numbers to get number facts and number bonds, how to teach addition and subtraction, multiplication and division. The problem is that if you teach things in isolation, you move on and then things get forgotten, but you also lose the benefit that one single tool will allow you to solve literally infinite problems in maths. There isn't a lot of maths to learn. It is such good news. When you learn the maths, for example, in this case, number, when you get deep understanding as a child with number, there isn't very much to learn. It's just about learning to use it in infinite ways. So making those connections is essential. It's also how the brain works. The brain likes making links. And then finally linked to that is the idea that tools are too often abandoned. So the idea about they don't need this equipment anymore. As children move up through the school, or even as they move up through the year with you, that stems from a lack of understanding from the adult as to the point of the tool in the first place. Any adult who doesn't understand how 10 frames can and should be used in year 6, in the UK that is, or in England that is, 10 and 11-year-olds, they have gaps in their subject and pedagogical knowledge that would lead to that. The only reason you wouldn't be using them is because you don't understand their role in developing those skills. So I'm going to pause there again and just come on camera and see what's in the chat box, because I'm aware, and the good thing about this being recorded is I'm firing a lot of stuff at you here, but it's stuff that when we stop and think like this, it will change your world completely. But you will have a sense of like, that makes sense, but I don't know how to do it. And of course, that makes sense is what I need from you. I don't know how to do it is where I come in. And not only me, but all of those amazing members who work with me who say, that was me, I've done it like this. Here's an example from my practice. I'm a childminder like you, or I'm working in a nursery like you, or I'm working in a reception class like you. And that is where we have this incredible strength. So I'm just going to scoot through. Let's see. We are becoming empowered says we've got County Claire Swiss, who was in Switzerland. I remember seeing it. Happy New Year from, sorry, I don't know your name unless it is Claire. I think as EY educators, we are becoming more empowered to step away from the norm, and our toolboxes are filling with the tools we need, not only to teach, but to explain what we are doing as parents. senior leaders seem to expect we teach the old way. Worksheets have no place in nursery. So I would also say, don't think about things like old way and new way, because often, again, people will use this against us. Just think about strong maths subject knowledge, which is what we're going to move on to next in this, and link it to the why, how, and what. Strong maths subject knowledge has never changed. Pedagogy is understanding how young children's brains. That has never changed. We've just learned more about how they learn. And the what is the very best way to use those two things to deliver a curriculum. And the same with medicine. All the time, we need to be constantly using what we know about the subject itself and how the subject works. So again, that could be in any part of life. As I say, it could be medicine, like how does the body work? How do these diseases work? And then think, what's the best treatment? And of course, then it just evolves. So that way, again, like you say, the confidence that we can then talk about our teaching will put you in such a good place. We are not generally respected as practitioners in the early years in the way that we should be. And that's partly because people look at the children and say they're very young and therefore learning must be easy, which of course is ridiculous. But it's partly because we haven't had the tools to have the confidence and knowledge that we need. We've got the passion, we've got the intelligence, we've got the commitment, but all of that needs to be coupled with immense knowledge. And I think we know that knowledge has often been lacking, particularly in maths, not because people don't want it, but because it's just not been available in the right way. All right, so let's jump back in. So do be scribbling things and drawing things in front of you, because I really want this to be something you can go back and reflect on. So this is language that I talk about all the time. I want you to imagine that you have a toolbox, and you saw in the comment there that phrase was used. You need to give your children a toolbox of mathematical skills, but I want you to think about EYMaths is totally about giving you as the practitioner the tools you need. When I give you the tools you need, you will give the children what they need. Too many schemes and approaches are straight away about do this with the children. And again, that would be like treating a patient with a guide saying, do this to the patient. I would much rather be treated by somebody who thoroughly understood the human body and the conditions the human body goes through before they start applying any treatment to me. Hopefully that makes complete sense to you. So let's unpack our toolbox for us. Here are the three things. And remember, I'm talking to you about this in relation to teaching numbers 0 to 5, but this would apply in every single area of mathematics. So you need, I've talked about a lot of this already, you need to know what it is you're teaching. It needs to be correct. And absolutely, by far, this not only is the most important message I would ever give you, that of course, before you teach somebody, you better make sure that you know it yourself, otherwise you're going to teach it wrongly. But it is the biggest change in everybody that I work with. They will say the difference in my maths subject knowledge means I am enthusiastic about maths. I can't stop looking stuff up. I'm referencing things, I'm questioning things, I'm open to new learning, and their confidence has gone through the roof. It is the best and easiest way to get respect from teachers of older children as well. So subject knowledge in maths is not age specific. So when you are understanding numbers 0 to 5, that is not about young children learning numbers 0 to 5. The maths subject knowledge is about the number system. What is it you need to understand about the number system as an adult that would be the same whether you were teaching 11-year-olds, 16-year-olds, university level, because numbers 0 to 5 are part of the number system. And it's not even the numbers themselves, it's what are numbers and how do numbers get built? How does the number system work? When you have that knowledge and that confidence, you will change everything you do every day, I promise you. So again, if you don't want to know the maths subject knowledge, you need to stop watching this video and possibly change your job as well, because what I'm going to take you to next is along those lines, and everything I do with anybody will always be starting with your subject knowledge. When you don't have good subject knowledge, and lots of you will be able to pop in the chat box now your journey, you will have very low self-confidence. You will feel very confused and overwhelmed. And the way that will manifest itself is you will be constantly looking stuff up. You will be constantly searching for activities. You will be putting questions on Facebook groups all over the place, very often the wrong Facebook groups, full of very kind, intelligent people, but they haven't got the right subject knowledge, so they give you the wrong information. They don't mean to. And then we all end up going down rabbit holes. Everyone's saying something different. People are saying things like, well, I've always done it like this. Hopefully you recognize all of this. It is a total mess. Do not go there. When you ask for information, ask it from a reliable source and invest in your own subject knowledge, and then you will know. You don't have to say to someone, how many sides does a circle have? You have to say, where would I go to find this out? Who would I read, or where's my reference point? Because we want to teach you to do this for yourself. You don't want to just be going on asking questions every time and not knowing whether the questions are being answered correctly or not. So who are you listening to? Where are you going for help? Is it leaving you feeling secure and clear, or is it leaving you feeling more overwhelmed? Buying into more and more schemes and joining more and more groups is a sign that your subject knowledge is not secure. So think about this as a checklist for you. For the children, the consequences are even worse. They get taught the wrong thing, and the reality is that their progress in the early years and beyond will be severely impacted upon. That should make us feel terrible. That is the biggest reason for us to improve our subject knowledge. One of the saddest statistics I can share with you is when you look at people in prison, the one thing they share more than any other thing in life or any other fact in life is low attainment in mathematics, more than reading, more than writing skills, which I'm sure are very high as well. But when you do not have good math skills, and remember I said they're maths attainment, not maths ability, but they haven't been given the opportunity to learn maths successfully, the consequences in life are horrific. When we look at mental health, physical health, poverty, opportunities, confidence, maths is huge. So this is one of the ways that we can make sure that we are absolutely doing the right thing for our children. So here's my first bit of guidance. This is not going to be new to many of you, but choose one widely known expert to begin with and stick to it. They are not going to be able to tell you everything, but you need consistency and you need to know that where you're looking is reliable. So I actually got two here, having said one, but the one I'm going to show you here is Maths Explained for Primary Teachers by Derek Haylock. I always say this, and you can go and play a game and see how cheaply you can find it online secondhand, because I just want you to have a copy. So many of you will have sold your copy or left it in a box in your parents' attic when you finished university because you were taught that this was for your training, and it never occurred to us at the time that we'd need it. Of course, would be every single time we plan. That shows how broken the system is. This is also very good for subject knowledge reference, and I would have copies of these in school. I would want to be able to say to somebody, well, let's have a look at this together. So again, remember, this session is not really a teaching session. This webinar is about awareness of what we need to know in order to be able to teach our children. So there's a lot more of this I can give you. Math subject knowledge 0 to 5. What do you need to know? So we're still on this very first. This is the why. You need to understand ordinality, cardinality, and nominality. They are the three ways that numbers behave. If you think I don't know what any of those words mean yet, you're just where I used to be. You're just where everyone who starts work with me is at the beginning. Just means you haven't learned it yet. None of us are born knowing this. You need to understand perceptual and conceptual subitizing. You need to understand the counting principles, and you need to understand place value and how it connects to base 10. So where are you on a line? If you draw a line in front of you now, a horizontal line, and on the left it says, I don't know anything yet, make sure you use that word yet, right over to I am the world's expert on this and can teach anybody confidently. On the right, I wonder where you are as a whole. I wonder where you were if you're on a journey with me now. But remember that it is a journey. It's not I can't learn. That's mindset. You can learn, but you have to have the right people to learn from, and you have to give it time. Remember what Emma said. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So if you're new to me, your stomach should have just gone I don't know any of that yet. How am I going to do it? That's normal. You can learn this. And as I say, it's mindset and having the opportunity. So the second area is the how. We call this pedagogical understanding. This is basically, pedagogy is how to teach in a way that people learn, how to understand how the brain works. Now, this is age group specific. So I'm going to recap there. Your maths subject knowledge is not age group specific. You need to understand circles in the same way when you're teaching 3 to 5 year olds as you do teaching 11-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, because a circle is a circle. And if we're talking about numbers are numbers. You need to understand the same thing. And you probably already see, if I go back here, how many of our teachers of older children will not understand this stuff, and therefore their teaching will be suffering as a result. So that should give you a kind of an excited buzz. But when we're thinking about pedagogy, that is how the brain of a young child works, and also how the brain works, because there's many things about the brain, of course, that are the same throughout all our years. And I want you to think about, again, if you're not interested in how the brain works and how young children learn, you're in the wrong job, and you're certainly on the wrong webinar. So only continue watching if you're interested. I have put non-SEND, so that's special educational needs, because obviously age is not relevant when you have specific needs. You can still learn very successfully with special needs, but it's going to be different depending on your special need, which again, I won't go into here, but I want to recognize that as a very important point. So here's a little story for you that I hope you can relate to. I might pop off and just pop something in the chat box if you can relate to this. Many years ago, like many of you, I was learning French in school for many, many years, and didn't successfully learn French. I have a load of vocabulary in my head, and sometimes I can string together a very poor sentence. But we went on a holiday to France, and my sister she's my younger sister, she was about 6 at the time, and didn't speak any French. And she made friends with some French children on the campsite. And within like 2 or 3 days, she was already speaking some French. And by the end of the week, she was speaking really quite good French. She didn't have one single French lesson. She wasn't being taught in the way that we would think about it from the other children. She was interacting with them in a meaningful way. She wasn't being shown images. There was no PowerPoints. There was no worksheets. What she was doing was she was trying to make things happen, which was to communicate with people who she didn't have a shared language with. And the way to do that was when she got the words right, good things happened and she was understood. She was frustrated. So when she learned that eased that frustration, that is how the human brain works. When I sit in a lesson, in my French lessons for years, and I'm not motivated, and I'm not learning things in a way that's meaningful to me, and I'm not getting to apply it, the only frustration I felt was that when was the lesson going to end? So if you can relate to that, we need to think this is how the human brain learns. And young children are the very best examples of this, because they don't go into situations thinking they can't learn, which is what adults tend to do. So this is the reality. When you don't plan maths and you don't plan activities about numbers 0 to 5 that fit with the way the human brain learns, and specifically the brain of a 3 to 5 year old, you're going to plan maths that is boring. Some of your children will put up with boring because they love you so much and they think that this is the way maths is. They don't think of it as boring. They just think this is the way maths is taught. And if you go to the bottom bullet point, you'll see those children are the classic examples of what we call memorizers. They can repeat what you've told them accurately, and they get a lot of delight in your response to them repeating what you've told them. Lots of our children, however, do not put up with it, and they tell you it's boring, or they walk off, or they misbehave, or they fiddle. And that happens at all year groups. Some children learn, of course, that, this is just the way it is. But the reality is none of those children are learning. The ones that are putting up with it are not learning, and the ones that aren't putting up with it aren't learning. You're basically creating children who can memorize and children who can't, but nobody is learning meaningfully. That is the reality, and that should hurt us to our core, because every minute you spend planning, if it's not engaging, if it doesn't mean anything to the brain, they're not going to learn. Doesn't matter if you teach it. Instead, We need to start noticing that we are surrounded by rich opportunities to teach maths all day, every day. Talk about it, interact with it, teach it, and I am here to help you to notice where those things are and to use them. And I'm going to give you some examples at the end of this presentation. It is easy, but it takes us to think about learning maths in a different way, just like my sister on the campsite. And you need to understand the maths. It doesn't just happen. You can't just surround children with things. There has to be the understanding there. Also, children use maths all the time in their play. I call this fascinations and provocations from Reggio Emilia. And again, I can teach you a lot more about that. But they are encountering maths all the time. And the more you know, the more you'll see that. And then you can actually use that at the beginning of your maths teaching. So when you go to do a teacher-led input on numbers 0 to 5, you look at the way they have been encountering number and amounts and comparison, and you use the context that they're already interested in, and I can help you to do that. So I'm going to come off again and just pop on, and I hope we've still got lots of people with me. Does this make sense so far? So while I'm just waiting for some of your comments to come through, so I have talked about the why, the how, and then the what, and then I've linked the why is your subject knowledge. It is natural to feel scared, but you have to be the adult here and think, I feel scared because of what's happened to me, because I believe that there are some people who can learn maths and some people can't. That's utter rubbish. There are definitely people who can learn maths more easily, but you're a human being. You're highly mathematical. Do you recognize there's a big deficit in your maths subject knowledge? Because there is for all of us. Do you recognize that that can leave you feeling very unnerved? So do you recognize, therefore, you just need to know where to go to get this? You need reliable sources. You need safe places to go to get that knowledge. Will it take time? Yes. Will you forget stuff? Yes. But you need to know that where you're going is going to give you reliable knowledge, not put your head into a big spin and make you, go down a rabbit hole. The how, the second one, so when we think it is the pedagogical knowledge. How do children learn mathematics? How does the brain learn mathematics? How does the brain learn anything? If you want to make your life easy, if you want your children to learn really well, if you want to be able to pick up on all the opportunities that are happening during the day and you just think, oh, it feels like my children are just learning maths and not teaching anything, just like my children on the campsite or my sister on the campsite, you need to understand how the brain learns maths. And there are specific things about little children with this. So does all of that make sense? Because the last section of this webinar then is going into the what, which is the territory you're almost familiar with. But we're going into the what knowing we've got the why and the how that is beneath that. It's like the what is the bit of the iceberg that pokes out above the water that everybody sees, but the bit beneath the water is the why and the how, and so important. So Lisa says, I've got understanding mathematics for young children. I'll just grab mine, Lisa, so everybody that doesn't know it can see. You got this one. That is really good as well. If that would be a second book that I would buy, but for your subject knowledge, this one, even if you're teaching very young children, because it's for you. So this one here, plus if I grab my real life copy of the Maths, this illustrated dictionary. So this is really good. For example, you want to look up definitions of shapes. There's my circle page. Make sure you can see it. So if you want to look up definitions of shapes and terminology and so forth, this is a really quick and handy guide to do that. Joe says, makes total sense. Melissa says, love the Advent countdown calendar. Oh, we'll have a look at that together, Melissa. Brilliant. Yeah, so Joe's saying she learned lots of French by being in France. And you think there's so much more I could talk about on this, and I won't today. But that idea about what strikes me is when I taught very multicultural classes, I'd have a 4-year-old standing there who was, say, Arabic and English speaker, and they turn to mum and speak Arabic, they turn to me and speak English, they turn to their sister and think, well, it doesn't matter because she speaks both. They're 4, and they haven't had one single English or Arabic lesson in their life, and they're splitting these two languages that are completely different from each other, speaking them fluently. We've got to start by thinking, if that's what their little brains can do, how did they learn it? What's motivated them to develop such a high-level skill? And then you look at us plodding along, teaching numbers 0 to 5 in the way that we generally do, and going, they can't learn this, they don't understand it. It's because of the way we're teaching it. not because their little brains are amazing. Okay, so Kirsty says she got her copy on on Amazon for £3. Brilliant. You're definitely in the running for one of the best value there. Okay, I'm going to carry on because I'm so I suddenly realised time as well. So I want to move on for the final section here to then show you the Swiss Army knife part of the picture here. So the tools we give our children, as in the things that we're so focused on teaching, they are not the point of the maths. So the way I'm going to tell you this or explain this isn't my example, but I love it, is when you go to a shop, you head off to B&Q or whatever to buy a drill. You don't actually want a drill. What you're aiming for is a hole in the wall. I really want you to think about that. The tool itself is not the point. It's what the tool can do that is the point. So I want you to quote this to everybody. As I say, it's not mine, but it is really, really important. We have been brought up as practitioners, and those of you that teach older children that might be joining me today, we've been brought up to think, I've got to teach them to use this tool. It's not. You've got to teach them to understand how to create holes in walls. And again, I won't say this at length, but my husband is a handyman. And depending on what you're drilling a hole in, you do it differently, and you use different fittings and you use different techniques. And that, again, has so many parallels in maths that if you just do everything the same way in maths, you won't be doing it in the way that fits the problem. And that's where the skill comes in. So if we have a look at this, it's all about the brain. When the brain sees the point, just like my sister on the campsite, when she thought these children don't understand me, I'm saying it like this and they don't understand me, so I'll say it like this. And then, oh, look, they do understand me. That is the brain building new connections. It's used to using that one, saying I'm speaking English, and then it's realized, oh, I've got to do something different. And of course, it's hard to begin with, and the more you use it, the easier it gets. So that purpose part, really, really important. One of the things I want to draw your attention to is that if we think that their ability to use a tool, so if I give an example, the ability to put some counters on a 5 frame and see how many are there, if what you're assessing is their ability to put counters on a 5 frame and say the number, you're going to assess them as having fluency in that. Whereas if we think, what's the point in being able to do that? So if I'm saying, well, how many of these things are there? Say there was some apple pieces, and the child puts the apple pieces at snack time on a 5 frame and says, oh, look, it's made the 3 pattern, so I know it's 3. Or, oh, look, I can see there's a 2 and a 1, and I know there's a 2 and a 1 in 3. Because they're using that tool to tell you how many pieces of apple there are. And this could be for self-registration. It could be how many days are left on the calendar. When they're using the tool, that's when the assessment should be taken. That is assessing that they have a skill. There is no point in assessing them having the skill out of context, because it's the ability to use the skill that should be the assessment. And that's why we end up at the end of the school year with people panicking their children can't do things, because you've taught them to use the tool, not use the tool to solve a problem. And when they learn to use it to solve a problem, they learn it much quicker and much more strongly. So when we combine our subject knowledge, our understanding of why learning needs to be meaningful, how the brain works, it needs to be connected, and we then focus on the tools we need, but the purpose of those tools, amazing things happen. We understand why we're teaching the skills. We teach them the right stuff, as in the correct mathematics. So we don't teach them things like this is a square and this is a rectangle, because actually they're both rectangles. And one is a square and one is an oblong. They're both special kinds of rectangles. And rather than you thinking, oh, I don't remember that, it's not a case of remembering it. It's a case of knowing, well, what makes a rectangle a rectangle? That's the bit under the water. That's the bit under the bit of the iceberg we can see. We teach them in the way they learn best, ways that are motivating, engaging, meaningful. We question our practice. We stay open-minded to learning new things. We don't snap at people on Facebook groups when they suggest we do things differently. We ask a question, and we always recognise that we don't know what we don't know, and hence the need to do those things. So what I'm going to do here then is take us towards this the precision that we now need. And with teaching numbers 0 to 5, the biggest deal that we need to recognize, and many of you have gone way past this already, is this issue here. So I hope you can see my pointer. If not, I'm pointing to the 1 here. So with counting, we'd say 1, 2, 3. And then we'd expect children to understand that the whole thing is called 3. That does not make sense to young children, because this one is 1, this one is 2, and this one is 3. Why on earth would the 2 become a 3 and the 1 become a 3? And why also would I label 3 things with only 1 number? Where here, when we were counting, we labeled 3 things with 3 numbers. This isn't the time to go into this in depth, but I want you to have a wow bomb moment here and think, oh my goodness, can you see why when you say to children how many, they count them again? Because this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3. And when you start introducing the idea that you could count them in a different order, 1, 2, 3, that one that was 2 has become 1, that one that was 3 has become 2, that one that was 1 has become 3, and we're going to call the whole lot 3. So I've got webinars about this, about why counting doesn't make sense and why the tools you need to teach your children in order to secure, let's shoot back up to the top here. We want to secure all of this. So we can go back to that slide and pause the video there. What we need to do is give them these tools, because the problem is giving them counting, and there is a place for counting, but when we're talking about number sense, counting is not going to give your children the number sense they need to do those things on that list. So what we need our children to do is understand that the whole thing is called 3. And I'm going to finish here by giving you 5 key tools that your children need in their toolbox in order to do this. And if you want to know how to teach your children to do this, then come and work with me. It's as simple as that, and I'll show you how. So the first key tool your children, and this again, my members that have worked with me for a long time, you'll be literally like, this is like water off a duck's back. You're so good at this now. But the first tool is noticing. What do you see? How do you see it? Young children, even at babies age group, are able to tell you, might not be using words, but they know that that amount is a smaller amount than that amount. If it's something they want to eat and they get the choice between that amount and that amount, they will go for the greater amount. They have an ability to see that there are different quantities. What they don't have is the ability to label them. Even when they are talking, of course, it takes time to learn what that's called. And they're looking at the whole thing. That's what the brain does as well. The brain doesn't look at things individually. The brain looks at things as a whole. Again, there's lots more I can teach you about that. Can you see here that what I've done is keep the cognitive load low? So everything in these images is similar color, similar size, similar shape, with the exception here. And you can see there's an opportunity to talk about bigger things and smaller things here. But when you keep colors similar, size similar, shape similar, the brain finds it much easier to look at things. So noticing everything. Literally, what do you see? How do you see it in everyday life with everything? I will give you masses and masses of ideas of how to do that. Second thing, you need to know and understand what perceptual subitizing is. The ability to see an amount and label it. To be able to see that amount and call it 2, and to see that amount and call it 3, or that amount and call it 1, and therefore that's 1 and that's 1. And if that's 2, then that's 2. So I'm looking at parts within the whole. Part whole is essential for number sense. So how well do you understand perceptual subitizing? Do you need my help or someone else's help to deeply embed this in your practice? Do you understand how it connects back to the maths subject knowledge? Conceptual subitizing. This is where we can join the parts together and know how many. So I say, for example, maybe that's a little bit further away. Imagine it was down here. And we might say, well, I know it's 3 because I can see a 2 and a 1. And I know there's a 2 and a 1 in 3. If this was a larger number, imagine maybe there's 2 more here. You might, as an adult, say, well, I know there's 5 because I can see there's a 3 and a 2. And you were using the 3 and the 2 as your perceptual subitizing, but joining them together and knowing there's 5 is your conceptual subitizing. Con coming from the Latin for with, because you're joining it together. And I will teach you a technique called Move It to Prove It to help you develop the ability for children to do this with numbers up to 3 to begin with, and then extend that to 4 and 5 and so forth. It's incredibly important. So these are in order as well. This first, this second, and then we introduce 5 frames. So 5 frames are always going to be important to our 11-year-olds, to our 15-year-olds as well, because the idea that there are 2 5s within 10 is an incredibly important numerical fact to work fluently with things like decimals and so forth later on, and much larger numbers. So what we learn in the early years is we learn to take our counters perceptually and we say, what does an empty number, an empty 5 frame look like? What does 1 look like on a 5 frame? What does 2 look like? What does, oh, that's supposed to be 3. I've lost 1. What does 3 look like? Can you see that when 1 is on a 5 frame, there's still lots of space left. When 2 is on a 5 frame, there's less space left. And then if this was 3, you might be able to perceptually subitize as a child that there's 2 left, and imagine you put 4, there's only 1 space left. And it's so important that we know you need to fill them up. Could be from this side, but they need to be next to each other, not just randomly placed, because we're creating what we call concept images of what the numbers look like. So there's lots more I can teach you about this. Then we move on to 10 frames. So here we've got what 4 can look like on a 10 frame using the 5 pattern here from the 5 frame. And then this is what Numicon uses. This is what we might call the 2s pattern. And you think, how well do you understand? Why does a child need to learn this? What's the best way to teach them? That's the how. And the what are all the activities that we can use to make their learning meaningful? Well, how can we embed this in problem solving and get the balance right between teacher-led and child-initiated, and embedding this in everyday routines? So I've got a little bit more to show you, but I'm just going to come off again and have a look at the chat box. How are we doing? Okay, so I missed about the name of the dictionary. Thank you, Jacob. Yeah, so it's Usborne Junior Illustrated Maths Dictionary. Okay, so no more questions. I'm going to carry on and finish off here. So I want you to be very careful, because if you are new to me, the things I'm going to show you next are going to make you either be a bit of a magpie and get drawn towards the shiny things, hence the diamond there, or if you've heard the phrase, oh, there's a squirrel. So everybody is like this in early years, and you will be even more like this if you are earlier in your journey. So I'm going to show you some things, and you are likely to go, I want that in my classroom. I want to do that. Where can I buy that from? And some of you are doing it already in the chat box in a good way. If you do that and you forget everything I've said about the why and the how, nothing will change. Doing the things I'm going to show you in the last part do not change your practice or your children's learning if you don't get the bit underneath the water, the iceberg under the water right. The point of this webinar today is not to give you ideas for activities. It's to make sure you know your stuff. And then you will be able to find and be inspired by activities left, right, and centre. So make a promise to yourself that you are not going to be, oh, look, there's a squirrel, and you're going to be aware of shiny object syndrome before I show you these things here. So here we go. Here are my members that work with me already using calendars to make learning meaningful. They're not only teaching their children about the passing of time and the days of the week versus the weekend, but they're also using their subitizing skills. They will cross off the days as they go, and they can see how much of the month has gone by, and we're looking at weekends at home and what's happening. The learning going on these is incredible, and the only reason it's really incredible is because of the knowledge the practitioners have. They understand what the children are doing. They understand what the destination is for the children. They understand when the children are struggling, what skills they need to then invest in. So remember, this is the tip of the iceberg. So this is the calendar that I sell on my website. If you're interested that they're using there, you can go and have a look. This was a countdown to Christmas we did. So if you were using some of the resources in my new Pathway membership, I did about the calendar, how to use a calendar on 5 and 10 frames. So every day a day went past, they crossed it off the calendar like this, and they took a counter off the 5 frames. And we weren't looking at a number particularly, because they might be very young children, but just the idea of it becoming less and less, and that 5 frame becomes empty, and then we empty this one. You don't have to know how many altogether, because that's one number representing an amount, which is a very complex idea for young children. Here's our what do you see and how do you see it, our noticing work. So much conceptual and perceptual subitizing there. What do you see? How do you see it? Low cognitive load. Lots of games, such as the game that I invented called 3 and Not 3, which is now all over the internet in various versions. I was very pleased to see. We look at books in different ways now. So we use books for maths. This one here, we don't use it as it's meant to be used. We use it much more widely. So what do you see and how do you see it? Can anybody see there that this is 4 dots, which you might know because it's 2 and 2. But there is a distinct issue here with the image. And we could get our children to reason why this image is slightly strange. I'm not quite sure what the author or publishers were thinking of there, but there's lots of opportunities for us in a really good way. Don't forget you can rewind this in case, because I know I'm going quite quickly here. I teach people how to play target games. So your children can look at how many beanbags do they need, use their subitizing for that, how much did they score, link their number names and digits to that. Lots of ways of making it meaningful. Here's children using the tough tray and using their patterns of the 5 frame and also their conceptual and perceptual subitizing to see we've got a 3 here and a 2 here and it fills the 5 frame. So we're therefore 3 and 2 equals 5. And we've got 3 and 1 more there equaling a 4, and you've got your part whole. So you've got some lovely, lovely things happening there. Games, this is a video which is in my Pathway membership, which is all about comparing objects. Why is my object similar to yours and different to yours? Can you find one that's got, if I pick the stick, I might pick the leaf and say I picked that because they're both brown. So looking at categorization and sorting. Oh, empty blank one. And here, again, this is another classroom here looking at self-registration. Who's here? This is where all the faces are. And in the morning, they come and put their faces on and they look at full 5 frames and part 5 frames. And when they're ready, they start to put these into 10 frames to see how many children. But look at this. This is Claire's work. Doesn't say how many, it says who is here today, because we're looking at full and not full to begin with. So again, lots and lots of wonderful things. That's Zophia's from the nursery, who is here, rather than how many, using 10 frames. This is the lovely Seeker, who is a childminder, and she had the problem that we don't have enough children in our provision to do self-registration. So they did, who did we see today? And these are all the people that the children may see during the day, and they use those to fill the 5 frames instead. Water bottles, no limits to how many ways you can use 5 frames and 10 frames, and about, are they all where they should be? Matching up the number of children here today compared to the number of water bottles and so forth. And finally, we can avoid things like this. So these are the sorts of things that you will see on the internet that are very well intentioned, but they show a complete lack of the understanding of the subject knowledge that we are trying to promote. Because here we've got a 10 frame. If a child did this, there's nothing wrong with it at all. But an adult modeling this is not understanding what a 10 frame is supposed to be used for. So hear that message very clearly. If a child does this, that's completely different. But an adult modeling that you can put 4 on a 10 frame like this is going to cause a lot of problems. Whereas a child, as I say, might just be playing in this way and tell you there's 4 and say, oh, look, there's a 2 and a 1 and a 1. So these are things that we need to look at together very, very carefully. So I'll leave you here, and then I'm going to show you one more about where you can go next. But did you see that when I showed you those slides, the likelihood of you starting to be, oh, I want to do that in my classroom. That is brilliant that you're saying that, but you need to get the toolbox of skills in place first. We absolutely need the subject knowledge, the pedagogy, and then the tasks that we plan will be the right tasks. And we will avoid shiny object syndrome, chasing squirrels, and feeling generally overwhelmed. So I'm going to finish by then showing you, let me see. So here, if you want to learn with me, Pathway is open now and got a really special VIP option. You can come and have a look at this yourself on the website until the end of the 8th of January. But what I will just show you here is what it looks like. And lots of you are already members of this. And this is the level before impact. So this is if you're starting out today and you've been thinking, I want to do this, but I don't even know where to start. This is going to give you everything you need. So I have started to put together here for you all the different areas of maths. So for example, I talked about circles. Here is your essential knowledge for circles. There is a video and there is a download as well. Here is the essential knowledge for teaching time using the calendars that I showed you there. Can you see the download here? If I click on that. Here we go. So you've got the subject knowledge that you need, common issues that adults misunderstand, so misteach without meaning to, examples of my members doing work with their children, like the ones I've been showing, ideas of how to use the 10 frames, and so forth. So you've got a video of me explaining all of this here, which of course you never get in training, particularly not recorded. You might get it live, but you've got those things there. And then what I have included as well, specifically for today, because of what we have been talking about, is this foundation number sense course, which will give you every single thing you need to teach the numbers 0 to 5, all those games, 3 and not 3, exploring part whole, self-registration, 5 frames, and little tiny bite-sized bits of courses. This tells you all about how to use it to begin with, so spend some time here, but this is all in the Pathway membership. So everything that you will have found yourself thinking, I want to learn this, I don't know this yet, what do I do, where do I go, that is the perfect place for you. So if you're interested, if this is where you feel like you should be, go and check out Pathway on the EYMaths website. Any questions you've got, you can fire a question at me through the Facebook group, or there's a contact button on the website. But to be honest, the reason I'm doing this today is because there's a £9 a month offer on at the moment that ends on the 8th of January. And I'm never going to offer that again. It's going to go up to 15, and there's no tie-in, and you can cancel any time. So you can come and see if what I give you suits you. If it suits you, stay. If it doesn't, you can leave. You have nothing to lose. You can come and binge watch these things. Some of the videos like 2 or 3 minutes long. Come and get that knowledge. Come and watch this video again. Pause the bits that were really meaningful to you and have a look at them, and share things with your colleagues. This is going to be on the YouTube site for you to use freely as well. So I'm going to have a look. So Joe's just about to, Rebecca's just moved to Pathway. Hayley's in Pathway. Hayley says she loves the water bottle idea. Julian says the children loved the countdown to Christmas. So what I'd suggest we do as well, Julian, is we look at now in Pathway, how do we do exactly the same now it's not Christmas? What should we count down to? Because there are ways you can use this every single week and your children will love it. And I'll tell you what, the Impact members could write a book on the way they use their calendars. So Kate, as an Impact member, says using these 5 tools definitely is a game changer. It's made such a difference to the way I teach number sense and the understanding of my children. And Kate is just such a great example of someone who I think Kate's confidence and love of what she's doing and ability to share what she's doing with colleagues and senior leaders has just grown unbelievably, particularly this term. So I don't know if Kate, if that feels like that represents where you're at. Perry says, does it matter if we get a 6th edition or 4th edition of Haylock? That's such a good question. I've got a 4th one. I would say go and find the cheapest copy you can find. You might even get like a 3rd edition or a 2nd edition today. If you decide to treat yourself to a more up-to-date copy in the future, that's up to you. You will find the older ones tend to have like, they might have had a CD with them originally, and these ones might have internet links, but it literally just get your hands on a copy of the book. And they all have these little teaching points in them as well, which are brilliant. And you can at any time come onto the Facebook group, the EYMaths 3 to 5 with Karen Wilding, and you can say, I'm looking up some knowledge in Haylock and he says this. Can you help me understand this a bit better? Or is there another source that could add to this? Because we in Impact now, the level above Pathway, we have now started, we talk about these sorts of things all the time, and we can say, oh, go and have a look in this book, or here's a link to an article or something like that. Let's see, anything else? So has anybody I know I said I'd be off at 11. I'm just going to stay and see. Is there anything you want to ask me? Is there anything you want clarification on? Is there a slide you'd like me to go back to? And you say, can you just say that bit again? If you need to pop off, that's fine. I'm going to have a little drink of water with all that talking. So Kate, that I just said about Kate's journey and their confidence. She says it definitely does, Karen. So thank you to you and the EYMaths community. It is honestly a match made in heaven, because when you're in a community, instead of just feeling so alone, and instead of throwing a question out to the universe and thinking, I don't know what a Facebook group to write this on, I don't know if the kind person who replies knows what they're talking about, because kind is not the same as knowledgeable. Both together is perfect, isn't it? We have this, stamp of reliability, because I will never tell you something just because I think I know it. The reason why I can grab these books so easily, if I move my camera, look at this, right? That is just, my screen's in the way. That is just a tiny glimpse into my books. And I know what I know because I am so open to learning. I'm so willing to be challenged. I know there's loads I don't know yet. So the only way I get past that is by looking stuff up, asking questions, never being shut down or arrogant about things, because how can I love what I do if I'm not open to that? So if you are the same, you're in the most perfect place. Okay, so Hayley, what I would say, so perceptual and conceptual subitizing, what I tell you on this training is you need to thoroughly understand them and come into Pathway, and I will teach you about that. And you will you really need to be doing subitizing every single day, and you will do it partly in a teacher-led way, like games and activities where you're very much in control of it in a very short, perfect way for your children, but you will find that you're using it in your continual provision and your everyday routines in absolutely everything. So the first thing, Hayley, when you come into Pathway, if you decide to do that, is jump into that course. Let me show you. So I'm going to show you where to find it instead. So if I go here, right, this one here, so I'm going to go back to the library, Hayley, and anybody else. So that's your main Pathway library, but I've added this one in for you because actually what this is, 3 times a year, I run a challenge with you. And the one coming up in January is going to be going up to numbers to 10. And I wanted you to be able to have the one we did in the autumn, which is this one. And this one actually is 2 years of 0 to 5 or 1 to 5 strictly, but teaching numbers up to 5 put into a new course format. And I say these are super, super tiny little snack size, but make sure you go in order because these are locked down until you've done the one before, just to help you stay on track and not become overwhelmed too. Janine says, coming back after a break from Impact, looking forward to catching up the new changes. Yeah, so Janine, that's a really good point for me to mention at this time, that the difference between people who make progress with EYMaths and me and the community is they put aside little tiny slots in their diary to go and watch something or to go and listen to something. And the people who don't make progress say, I wanted to, but I didn't have time. And you're like, well, actually, in no part of life is time ever going to make itself available to you. If you want to become a cyclist or a runner or join a new, a class like a yoga class, you wouldn't wait for the time to come about naturally. You'd say, I'm going to go and cycle at 4 o'clock, or I'm going to go to my yoga class at 7:30. You had to replace what it used to be doing with something new. And that literally is the difference between these two groups of people. These people go, I didn't used to be studying with Karen, so therefore I have to put 15 minutes aside to do it. And actually, because it doesn't feel like a drag, because what you do is you use what you learn instant in your teaching, and then it makes your life a lot easier. So if you're starting the journey with me, your best friend is the timer on your phone. Put 15 minutes on your phone, grab a drink, do something, and you will keep moving and you'll do brilliantly. You're very welcome, Hayley. Joe says, should I sign up for the TENS course as well? I would, Joe, have that on you can sign up for the TENS course whenever you like, but I know what the Impact members would say who are in that next stage before Pathway existed. Come into Pathway, consume what's in Pathway, put aside the time to learn, get into a rhythm, And then you can either join Impact and study TENS, and you get lots of free time with me included, and you get a discount on the TENS course. So you can come and talk to me about that when you're ready. Or you can buy the TENS course separately and do a self-study. So you've got those two options. But when you're ready, Jo, you literally just tag me in the Facebook group and I will come and give you advice, or you can email me and I'll help you. Brilliant. So Jacob's talking about floor books. So much we can share about floor books, documentation, amazing ways of not only you learning to capture what your children are doing so you can understand it better, but also to then inform other adults in your setting and parents and inspectors to help them understand what you're teaching. Because when inspectors come in and we all get rabbits in the headlight and we can't do justice to our practice, things like floor books and displays, the work we've done on what we'd call documentation with Impact members that I can share some of that with you in Pathway is phenomenal. It's easily the biggest game changer to you being able to start to show other people what you're doing and slow things down and show the bigger picture. Because again, I know that's a massive issue. Carolyn says, thanks for helping to get my brain back into work mode for tomorrow. Looking forward to going back and using the 5 frames as part of our registration. Been using this since I did your subitizing course. Well, Carolyn, I don't know, and you said it's a game changer. I don't know if you've decided to join Pathway, but you'll have those materials to return to and to extend your practice there. So that is so exciting. Okay, have I missed anything? Rebecca says, love the TENS course. I mean, the Teaching Essential Number Sense course, the TENS course, that is the one single thing that every single Impact member talks about. Says, once I did the TENS course, everything was different. So I've put Pathway in now, so you can begin a journey towards the TENS course. If you decide to do the TENS, it's there for you, either as part of Impact or independently. You might decide to go Pathway, Impact, Greater Impact. You might decide to stay in Pathway. All those options are open to you. Jacob says, got Ofsted very soon. Yeah, honestly, there's so many stories in Impact about people saying, I didn't change a thing for Ofsted. I've never been so confident. They didn't used to take much notice of what we were doing, particularly in nursery, and they came and they were blown away by what we could do and what the children were doing. So Melissa says, just checking, do you continue to revisit previous skills, i.e. once you are on 5 frames, do you continue perceptual and conceptual subitizing? That is such a good question, Melissa. Absolutely, because things in real life do not, of course, appear in 5 and 10 frames. So things in real life, like I've got sheep in the field next to me and I might be looking out, and if I was wondering, I don't think I would wonder this, but I was wondering how many sheep there were, and I might say, oh, I can see a 3 there and a 3 there and a 3 there. And I say, well, I know that's 9 because I can picture that on my 10 frame, or I can see there's a 3 and a 2 and a 3 and a 2, and I know that's 10. You can see the links to addition, subtraction, and multiplication and division there as well. Using those two tools together constantly, because most of the things you're going to find in real life, they're either not going to be able to be put on a 5 or a 10 frame, like the sheep in the field, or they might be, fixed down in some way. Having the 5 and 10 frame and moving things that can be moved really helps you to start understanding how to compare numbers, how to create images in your head of numbers to compare, and also base 10. So all of that, Melissa, you get a massively good understanding of that from do the course I've just shown you that's underneath me here. Let me just put that back on. Do this course here, the Foundation Number Sense, and then come and you get the challenge for free when you're in Pathway. And that'll be at the end of January. That'll be the 1 to 10, and I'll extend those skills with you, and you will have such a clear understanding of that, and you can ask me lots and lots of questions throughout that. Kirsty said, anybody change from Impact to Pathway? Yeah, so Kirsty, if you're an Impact member, we sent everybody a form saying if you think you'd be better suited to being an Impact, into Pathway, you can move down to Pathway, and some of the Impact members who'd graduated from the 10s moved up to Greater Impact. So that form was sent to everybody well before Pathway opened. If you've missed that, what you need to do is we need to cancel your Impact membership, which you can do yourself, but make sure you email us as well. And you can sign up to Pathway straight away. So you'll just see it as cancelling one and moving the other. And Pathway will suit you if you are at the beginning of your journey or maybe you'll get yourself tied up in knots about coming to the live events that I run. You don't get, or I say it the way around, you get a lot more of me in Impact. You get the live training with me once a month. You get the Q&A with me. You get the special group. You get a lot more in your library as well. But you have to put in the 15-minute slots to use it and use it straight into your practice, which makes complete sense, of course. And if you don't do that and you find you're getting stressed about that, better to move to Pathway, but you're still going to have to find time to watch the videos in Pathway. So that time issue is always going to be there. And of course, as I say, it's the same in any part of life, isn't it? If you want to change anything, you have to put the time in to do it, and then the payoff is amazing. Sarah, I've been an Impact member but not used consistently. Should I stay in Impact or change to Pathway? So Sarah, sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, you've got to ask yourself, what level of support are you ready for? Don't be in either membership if you're not going to watch the stuff and you're not going to engage, because I can only help you when you watch the things, because obviously you're here to learn, and I know that will make complete sense to you. But every single person's life is busy, and when we do I've got to wait till I've got time to do something, it never happens. It's got to be, instead of doing things the way you're doing them at the moment, replace some of that time with learning in either Pathway or Impact, and you will instantly change your teaching. You will feel much happier, much healthier, much more excited. Your children will make fantastic progress. It's a no-brainer. So Impact will give you a lot more of my support. Pathway is really aimed at the people who are just starting out. So I wouldn't see Pathway as in a way needing less of your time, because both require you to get engaged and follow the stuff for you to benefit. So I hope that makes sense. So Melissa says, struggle with the timings of the lives. So that, Melissa, you know, the reason we run them on Saturday mornings is because that's what suited most people. They're always recorded. In Impact, we have people who come to everything. That's the fewest number of people. We have people who sometimes come to the lives, and we've got some lives at 7:30 at night and some at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. in the morning at the weekend to try and suit people's lives. So some people come to some and not others and watch and catch up. And then we've got people in Impact who always only watch the recordings. So really you can do any of those things. There's a lady called Jane, who I always cite, Jane Blackburn, who really busy life, 2 children, always watches everything recorded and then comes onto the group and interacts as much as anybody else. So I think, to be honest, it's about how you decide to use it, rather than I can't make the live so I can't be an Impact. You think, I can't make that live this week because I'm doing something else, so I'll schedule in watching the recording and I'll still go on the group and interact. But actually, oh look, I can make that live, pop it in my diary. Yeah, so you can hear it is a mindset thing for all of us about making choices. Okay, Kirsty, but reach out and we can help you. Great. All right, everybody. I think so. I'm just going to finish by showing you, in case you don't know already. Let me just pop over to the Facebook group. So this is our Facebook group here. If you're a Facebook user, even if you're not a Facebook user, I would join Facebook and shut all your settings down. I don't use mine socially. I use mine because the learning is so amazing. So this is our session today. All the things we were looking at. There's my 0 alcohol gin and tonic. Happy New Year to you all. You can click on here and look for different things. So for example here, look, calendar. And you can find examples that people have shared. So that's a great way to search for things. And you can always ask a question. If I go back here, pop a question in here, you can tag me, and I can always point you in the direction of other members as well. But there are some amazing things that get shared on this group. And the more we share, the more we learn together. And if you are thinking about joining Pathway, here are a couple of our new members that you can have a look at here. But as I say, no tie-in. You can cancel any time, so go and check it out. See what you think after today, and if you like it, stay, and if you don't, there are other places that might suit you better. All right, so take care, everybody, and you know where I am. Website, you can leave me a message. Facebook group, leave me a message. But otherwise, for those of you joining Pathway, Can't wait for you to introduce yourself. There's a little section at the start there, and we will start transforming your life and your children's lives. So take care, everyone, and have a great start to the new term, particularly if you go back tomorrow.